All right, guys, we're going to get this going. It's a little bit after 8. So call the meeting of Capital Programming Committee to order Wednesday, November 29th, 8:05 a.m. Present, Richard Hussey, Matt Lowell, Peter Kaiser, myself, Jason Bridges, our ex officio, Libby Gibson. There are no public in attendance. And I'd like to entertain a motion to accept, well, a couple things. I want to clean up the agenda and then deal with minutes. So entertain a motion to accept our meeting agenda as posted, striking November 8th minutes. We had no meeting on November 8th. And holding the DPW garage facility over to review, supplemental review over to next week.
Move to approve.
Second.
Excellent. So that carries unanimously. And then on to the minutes, entertain a motion for approval of the minutes for the meetings from October 25th and November 2nd with a hold for revisions of November 1st and November 15th, which revisions will be distributed by Terry once she's back. She's not with us this morning. Wish her well, she has bronchitis.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, no nays, that carries unanimously. All right, so just to structure the meeting, we're going to be going into discussion of the FY19 capital project request for DPW transportation. There's a couple of groupings here. Maintenance programs, which deal primarily with annual type expenditures where sub-projects are kind of addressed from a list as can be done. And then the bridge projects. And we are going to actually ask Rob McNeil, our DPW director, to address those. And then we're going to go into the other side of transportation, which is great and interesting stuff. Hopefully community members are listening because it's a big question about what gets done and improvement projects. So we'll do the presentation of the request. We'll do a Q&A with Rob and Libby here, and then a discussion between if there's any discussion on rankings. So with that, Rob, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much. Building off of that introduction, I would say it's heartening to hear some real interest at the selectmen's level over the past few months of their support for transportation. I know of the three big strategic initiatives that the current makeup of the board is looking at. Transportation is one of them. With that, we have taken an approach similar to the previous presentation for capital, which breaks down or takes a look at our maintenance of transportation system with a strategic approach, taking a look at systems. Pavement, breaking down to pavement, cobblestones, multi-use or shared use path improvements, and sidewalk, crosswalk, ADA ramp improvements. While not all of those categories are funded, we have started to identify some real needs just based on the quantities of stuff that we are responsible for. The town has been working prior to my tenure and even prior to the deputy's tenure a pavement management program to help inform, to really take a condition assessment of our infrastructure and to start to pull together a program to ultimately improve the overall quality and rideability of our streets. Public streets here in town. So that is the basis of the 3.5 that was identified, which has been whittled down to 1 million ask at the beginning. And so we have page 10 that sort of breaks down the fiscal 18 paving projects to get the original ask of 3.581387. What that's going to look like with only the 1 million in funding, I can't answer today, but I will say that we will be working on a revised list based on this level of funding. What I can say is sort of just to give the committee a little bit of background on the pavement management program and try to move things along here. The point is that we look at prioritizing roads when they're in the best of condition to try to use the least costly mechanism to keep them there, from crack sealing to start from, to general maintenance, to then getting into some mills and overlays, and ultimately some deeper mills and structural overlays, and then ultimately getting down into the more significant costly repairs to roads, including reconstruction. So this pavement management cycle takes a look at a roadway being essentially a 20-year cycle. So we look at the overall miles of road that we have, and essentially a repair or replacement cycle of 20 years. And ultimately, we're looking at trying to deal with about 5.5 miles of road per year. Based on current unit pricing, which, you know, we're on an island, things, particularly asphalt, costs substantially more than off-island prices. Right now, we're at essentially an annual program of about $3.5 million to deal with what we should be doing annually to keep up with our roadways, and that's just pavement. So with that, moving on to the next item there, the cobblestones. Substantial amount of cobblestones in our downtown. The surfaces are getting to a point where they're really unacceptable. We're starting to address that with project requests that just went in today, in fact, to start to address some of Upper Main Street. But we need to invest annually in our cobblestone streets to ensure that we're not going to get to this point. We didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to fix it overnight, but we need to start to address these mechanically and strategically annually. So we're looking at about $500,000 in cobblestones annually, which will cover about 2,000 square yards. That's not funded this year, but we're going to continue to ask because there is a real need there. Moving on to multi-use paths or shared use path improvements, we now have on the order of magnitude of about 30 miles, I believe, of shared use paths around the island, most of which were originally designed as strictly bike paths. They have now, not just the new term, but the new design and use are shared use. So you have all kinds of different uses out there. And so the original designs for bike paths don't necessarily apply. And we, just like we're dealing with some widenings or narrowings of different roads when we look at them, this new shared use approach will change our maintenance programs of our existing paths to maybe some widenings instead of just crack sealing or doing some small repairs. But the point is we have about 30 miles of these paths as they exist, and that is essentially another network of paved surfaces that we have to deal with. There has never been, that I can find, any real earmark dedicated to that sort of thing. So that's what we started to do here. Recognize that the funding for that should be around $200,000 a year to just deal with the surface as it exists, not even dealing with widenings or really any other improvements regarding to drainage or any other upgrades. So I appreciate the manager's support by keeping that in at least at half the funding that was requested. And I think as we show progress, hopefully that'll come up to speed. And then moving on, just additional sidewalk, crosswalk, and ADA ramp improvements around town. We're starting to address sidewalks that have been on the docket now for a number of years. I understand that the funding has been there, but it hasn't really been utilized. So we were not prepared to ask again without showing actual progress. So I'm happy to report that if you haven't been down Easy Street yet, the Easy Street Straight Wharf sidewalk widening has kicked off, and it's under construction currently. We're going to show progress and be able to come back next year and be looking to identify additional areas in the core that's going to start to really address sidewalk volumes to manage the massive pedestrian volumes that we have downtown. And so moving out in the out years, we've kind of kept that commitment to really making some substantial changes to the sidewalk program downtown to the tune of $1 million, and we'd be happy to adjust that based on what we can handle and what projects are ready to go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob. Before you move on to the bridges, I'm going to do a quick Q&A, if you don't mind with
Sure.
that. And we'll welcome Christy Kickham, 8:15, just for the minutes. Is there any questions for Rob at this point, Richard, and then Nat?
Rob, on page 10, I see fiscal year 2018 paving projects
Yeah.
totaling $3.5 million. How much of that was accomplished?
For fiscal 18,
Yeah.
Should that have been a 19?
I think, yeah.
Is that a 19?
that
Was that the number that was reduced?
we had identified this stuff in the spring, late spring, when we started to look at what the pavement management program was starting to kick out. Right now, I would say we have, we have not done much of this, if any at all, in fiscal 18. I think this was our original draw-up of, if we were to kick off doing
Okay,
projects in
so just,
fiscal 18.
I'm confused. The $1 million that you're asking for this year will be applied to this group of fiscal year 2018
Yeah,
projects?
the fiscal 18 that's identified on this original project here is essentially our priorities. That's the highest priorities that we've identified. So while we will be reprioritizing, based on the funding level to see how far it'll carry us, I would say if you start from the top and work down, regardless of what the fiscal identification is, that's where we are with priorities.
Thank you. Anything else, Richard, on that? Nat?
Just a couple things to help you on that explanation on the multi-use pass, Rob. Whenever, I don't know what year it was, I would say 10 years ago, Mike, the first 10-foot wide bike path was the little Eel Point, little dingy-doo there, it goes down to the White Rock. That was our first 10-foot wide bike path. The rest of them are 8 prior to that. Meaning, when you say widening, theoretically, we're just talking about taking some of these 8s maybe and tweaking them if we,
Sure.
that's what you're saying, correct? Because that's what we should be doing. Like
Yes.
Surfside should be 8 feet. 10 feet, excuse me. And wherever we can do it, if there's a major project, unlike what happened with Milestone, which is really too bad that didn't get made into 10 feet with $8 billion worth of work, and it's just still 8 feet.
The point is, when we go to maintain them,
You're trying to
we
figure
want
out
to
how to
identify if they need to be further improved
Yeah,
by widening.
yeah.
Then we would take that opportunity to do
Like
that.
we had Violet Road before, we just made it 5 feet, like the Hooper Farm, and now it's 8, at least 8. Thank God it's 8, and that is a huge improvement.
Sure.
So that's good planning because we need to do that. Because 10 feet turns into 9 with the grass growing. And after 5 years, it's smaller. You know what I mean?
Well, part of that too is maintaining the brush cutting,
Yeah.
and that's something. Vegetation management is something that we've definitely identified as something we need to get more aggressive with, and I think you'll see that through the winter.
And I appreciate your what you're doing down there on Easy Street. I haven't looked yesterday. I looked the day before. That's going to be great.
It'll be
There's
a
plenty
market
of width
improvement.
there for big trucks. If anyone says anything,
It's been designed.
It's all set.
We have a 12-foot truck lane through there, so
Yep,
we're
it's
fine.
it's perfect.
Thank you.
Anyone else, questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Peter. Peter K.
Just, obviously, townwide pavement improvements, roads, very important. Cars need to be able to travel seamlessly without any issue. As far as cobblestone, multi-use, and sidewalk, I kind of see those as a secondary category. And just curious if, $200,000 allocation in 2020 relative to $500,000 for cobblestone improvements and $1 million for sidewalk, crossroad, and ADA ramp. Does it seem like the multi-use allocation might be a little low relative to the others, in your guys' opinion? Was there ever any discussion or methodology behind the relative amounts that you guys allocated to those three categories?
I would say that the multi-use paths allocation that seems to be a bit low was, let's say, starting a category that never existed. Essentially recognizing that we have now quite a inventory, and we've been doing barely anything to these for many years. So we wanted to at least get a foothold and start to establish a program similar to the road program. It's not.
We need to do that.
It's a start. So I would tend to agree with you, particularly when we start talking about widenings of existing paths. But this is first step.
Okay, because I just, I feel like there's a big emphasis on limiting the amount of traffic, cars required on the island. Multi-use paths are a great way to get long distances. They're essentially sidewalks from point A to point B that are over a mile long and out of town. So I guess if 200,000 to start, even though the out years are based off that number, that might grow in the future to help facilitate more, mid-islands.
And the other part of that is, we recognize that we have windows of time to get this stuff done, right? So where we may need to get off of a road, we want to have a place to go to do other work as well. And right now there's a limited capacity to get everything done here. So the whole point is, if we have the means to go with a more aggressive overall maintenance program, it may attract some additional capacity to do that work.
Yep, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, Rob, I got a couple of questions for you. Actually, some requests. So you mentioned revising the page 10 paving list, which is great. If you could get that revised to reflect $1 million for this year, and then your out year for FY20, what you're anticipating. And I understand it'll just basically be a reshuffling of that list, but that's, your whatever, how you ever decide to do that. So we have it, and we'll have it for tracking purposes going forward. I think on the annual paving, you answered my other questions, which is great. Don't have to ask them. And then on the annual multi-use path improvements, I think it's beneficial for us to have a similar way of at least identifying the work that's requested and then tracking it. And then that will carry through in any of the other. I understand some of these projects, some of these are kind of new programs in a way, if you will. But we'll need a list similar to your page 10 paving. Of what you anticipate will be your expenditures. And obviously, it's not part of the town meeting warrant article, so you're not locked into those specific. You need the ability to be able to juggle those a little bit, but we would like to understand the priorities, I think. And then on the back side of it gives us kind of an after-action ability to see if targets are being met, and if they are, great, and if they're not, we can ask questions, and if there's a process-related thing that undermines a goal, we become aware of it, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
And then I had a specific question with respect to, so we had a FY18 $75,000 authorized for Old South Road multi-use path design and repairs. And you don't have to answer it at this moment. I understand you guys are working together on this and trying to bring there's an overlap, but I will be following up to find out how that last year's authorization relates to where we are, because I didn't see it closed out.
It hasn't even started.
It hasn't started yet.
It's not related to any of the court operations.
Oh, the annual, no, I'm talking about the annual multi-use path stuff. So that was a separate discrete request that has nothing to do with, kind of predates this annual multi-use path line item?
Yes.
Okay, answers the question. Christie?
Rob, sorry if I'm repeating a question that was already asked. The unpaved roads, is there a game plan of as far as how you go about, and this might be for Libby too, which roads might be ones that you choose to pave? Is there a long-term plan, or is there what criteria takes a unpaved road and paves it?
So I'm happy to speak on that.
You go and then I'll.
That's a long one.
Sure. So I would say where unpaved roads fall into the mix in discussions of, let's say, the modern reconstruction of our transportation system, we're considering those for let's say, construction up to a modern standard. Where they're a local road that's, a dead end, or, they're likely to remain that way for the foreseeable future. The example I could provide that's in the mix right now is Lover's Lane. Lover's Lane has become a major player because of just where it's at. So that is something that is being considered to be paved and is actively being worked on to identify what that will take. But it's not as simple as just saying, oh, we're going to go out and pave a road, because there's quite a process to it.
I would only just add, enforce what Rob said, and it's really a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, right.
First Way, for example, has
13
been
years.
kind of in mind for paving for quite a while, and in fact, it was excluded from the bylaw that we have that says, that restricts the paving of unimproved roads. We do have a bylaw about that, and we're researching right now whether or not Lover's Lane is even subject to that. But besides Lover's Lane, I don't know of any right at the moment that would be targeted for paving. Now, sometimes the planning board will have a requirement if there's a subdivision along an unimproved road to pave it. For example, Westchester Street at the end, sort of Westchester Street extension. And that ended up having to come to the county, because it's a county road, to get approval for that.
Got it.
Thank you.
So some different hands in the tar pot. Okay, before we move on to bridges, Rob, just want to ask, the annual gravel, I understand the labor comes out of the operating. Are you carrying the estimated material cost of $150K? Is that a hold off until FY19 and just didn't make it to the list, or what are you thinking there?
It is a hold-off. We're going to be looking at trying to fund that through our normal operating budget,
Including the materials?
as much as we can.
Okay, just so it's in our materials. Okay, great. Bridges are yours.
So the bridges are basically placeholders for design work essentially to start the conceptual redesigns of both of these bridges. And just to remind folks, there are three, Sconset Footbridge being the third, and that's essentially pushed out. So that's been repaired, is operational, and we have the go-ahead on that. But recently, we've repaired also Massasoit Bridge. But it's also clear to us that that's just a repair back to the status that it had before, which is weight restricted. It also is a single lane bridge. So there's some other challenges, as long as we're talking about it. Millie's Bridge obviously is another big one on the ticket these days. Ames Avenue, with the washover now out at Nantucket Beach, that has really come to the forefront. So there's a number of things that need to be looked at with regard to our bridges. The two that really jump out of the vehicular bridges, mostly because of weight restrictions, and just being able to modernize those so that they can handle the expected loads, as well as Millie's now with the issues that are going on out there. So these aren't going to happen overnight, but we need to start to address them and prioritize, what the future is going to be, whether it's going to be replacement or repairs or other options.
I just want to jump in first, unusual, but just on the Millie's Bridge, I'm just kind of curious what the thoughts are on the design with respect to the erosion and inflows from the ocean, and without segueing into a big discussion on erosion control around the island, although I think it's an important topic and it's something we should be discussing, it's not this morning. But with the erosion being out there, in terms of the design, are you looking at driving piers till you hit something? I know, we're on a sand-based aquifer. What
Sure.
are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so the thoughts are to essentially look at designing a structure that would be able to handle what's expected in the next 50 years of that area, which could be an opening. You know, we could be looking at another Smith's Point that really just opens up. So those are some of the things we'll have to kick around. The bridge may be something that is designed to accommodate flooding and then be restored back shortly after. There's a number of things that we can take a look at. What's clear to me is the bridge that exists out there today was never designed to handle wave action or to handle that sort of experience if it truly opens up to the ocean. So sooner rather than later, we really need to have some more serious discussions. Town manager has asked me to take a look at some other options for Ames Avenue, and I've been working together with the Plus office to identify some of those potential changes out there, outside of the bridge footprint itself.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Rob on the bridges at this point?
We don't have enough time. Okay.
Well,
No, beautiful. For me.
Okay.
I'm fine. Anyone else?
I just got to,
Chrissy.
if I remember, the bridge was just redone like maybe 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago maybe?
You're talking Millie's Bridge,
Yeah.
Ames Avenue. So
Yeah.
there had been some repairs done out there, mostly to the bridge deck and some other small pieces there.
Not structural.
Yeah.
That's not sure.
But do you have a question?
I was just curious to see how that recent work had affected how you're going about doing maintenance on it. That's all. But
As far as
if that's
maintenance
what-
goes, it's essentially maintenance free right now. There's a few things that do need to be addressed, but very, very few, based on the work that had been done. The bridge right now has been looked at most recently after the washover. It was inspected by the state dive team for DOT. The report shows that it's in good shape. And the one thing that they did mention was, it's rare that they come out to a spot and see accumulation of material. Normally it's scour that they're really concerned about to undermine the footings and such. But they did applaud us for putting out the concrete to minimize or eliminate the threat of erosion that we identified during the washover that happened. So I think we're all on the right page where we need to be right now. We're monitoring, we're taking a look at things as they happen, and we're taking steps through this program to be able to chart the future for this thing.
Great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to pick up transportation improvements, and Mike, if you want to start at the top of the list, and then there's going to be a couple of housekeeping questions I'll have as we go, just in terms of information and coordinating, cross-referencing items.
Sure.
With that, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The first project on the list is the Sparks Avenue sidewalk through the Complete Streets planning process. You may recall it a couple of years ago, the Board of Selectmen approved a Complete Streets policy. The policy was a prerequisite to participating in available statewide construction funds for multimodal improvement projects, transit projects, sidewalks, bike lanes. Once the policy was improved, a universe of these types of projects were evaluated and prioritized. That prioritization plan has been submitted for state review now. Once that's approved, there's an application process for the top priority project within that plan. At this point, that application process would probably not be completed for FY18. It would be more likely for an FY19 project year. In this, the Sparks Avenue sidewalk project, it's quite a big project. I think our target budget from the state was $400,000. That's the amount available to any community for these types of projects. This particular project is a little over $1 million for widening out the sidewalk from the high school to the Rotary. Therefore, if we did marry funds, local funds, with the funding available statewide, We believe we can essentially participate, I guess 60% of the project would be locally funded. Something like 40% of it would be funded through state allocation. So that's why that project was submitted. It was scored as a top priority. And we think there's some potential to utilize some federal state aid to help reduce some of that cost for that project. The second project here is the Surfside improvements. This is basically a continuing phase of the boulevard improvements, seeking improvements to for roadways linking the airport to Surfside Road. There's design and other right-of-way acquisition costs in FY19, and then the construction of that next phase of improvements are listed in FY20. The next two projects are two roundabout design requests. One is for supplemental funding of Four Corners mini roundabout improvement. There's been a preliminary design developed as part of the hospital expansion. There's some funding available through the Chapter 90 process for the preliminary design, and this request is for the completion of that design process. Same with the Bartlett Surfside roundabout. There was I believe an FY17 appropriation for initial design. That process is also starting in tandem with the Four Corners and I'll also note the Fairgrounds Old South Road roundabout. We're trying to advance three of those projects at the same time to realize some efficiencies, mostly with meeting times and that kind of travel and survey, that kind of thing. This is supplemental funding to go beyond the preliminary design and utilizing some funding that's already been authorized.
Before you jump into Old South, let's break off just because that's going to be a bigger.
Four Corners, just so everyone knows, that's
Sure.
Surfside High School, correct?
Correct. Surfside,
Just
Atlantic,
because
Prospect.
If I have a question on that, everybody else is like, "What's this?" Because there's a lot of Four Corners on Nantucket, Mike. We all know what Five Corners is.
There's only one.
So
the
just
Four
making
Corners.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so on those, has everybody had a chance to kind of look through the materials, look at the site plans?
I just have one quick question.
Richard, please.
Is Sparks Avenue, the first project you spoke about, is that in fiscal 19 or 20?
20.
20.
It's listed here in 20.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was going to be my question is.
You mean the
with
sidewalk part you asked, right?
With the
Sidewalk,
Okay.
yes.
With the complete streets, how does that, just tell us what's going on there,
Okay.
please.
If the funding is available in FY20, I don't believe we would seek funding in FY19 for statewide aid, or that's a conversation we could have. It's just that only a portion of the sidewalk widening would be done. More realistically, the section between the Hooper Farm Road intersection and the Rotary, that would probably fit or more align with the budget that's available. So that would be the part that could be completed. If we do the whole project at once, then we would need some supplemental aid locally to have the whole project completed. That likely would be the section between the gas station, Cumberland Farms area, and the high school driveway.
Okay, so then, is there any, I guess, Brian, maybe you too, is there any jeopardy on the 40% from the state if we do the design ourselves? And can we still utilize that percentage of state input contribution on the construction stage, even if we don't use them at the design stage, or did they do some type of linkage? Do they require some type of linkage?
There would need to be a local contribution for design, or you're allowed to use some of the Complete Streets funding for design purposes. So that would be part of our application process. If we submitted to just do a portion of the Sparks Avenue project.
Okay, so then is the state funding jeopardized if we put it out to FY20?
For that particular, no.
that-
I
yeah, just this
would say
project.
no. We could advance one project, one section of that, one phase of that project, advance that using state funding, and then if local funding was available in FY20, then we could pursue that. I'm thinking the most efficient way to do this is probably do the entire project at once. So if FY20, the funding was available in FY20, then we would apply to seek the state funding to have it commingle those funds and do one project at once.
Okay, so we don't jeopardize the potential for the state contribution by putting it off a year, is what I'm
No, you would just
getting at.
utilize that aid in FY20 instead of FY19.
I didn't know if there was like a time-specific program or something else. Okay, great. And then I think just in the broader aspect of those four, and then it'll be a question relative to all of these that you've got. Any rights-of-way issues or easements required or licensing for these particular projects, or they're all within the right-of-way?
Where we know that there's going to be right-of-way impacts, or very certain there will be, that's been built into, say, the Surfside improvement projects. There was a calculation for that. The work on Surfside, on Sparks Avenue, that would be done within the public layout.
Okay.
Can I say something about the Four Corners thing too? There's a
Please.
significant issue with the school on this. The last time this came up, they are not in favor of a roundabout path. So that needs to be worked through with them.
Is that part of why it's
That was-
going out to 20, just to have an opportunity to have some additional dialogue with them?
I don't,
I
I
think,
think it's just that the thing needs to be designed. There were some easements that had to be acquired from the hospital also, which I think have been. Mike?
Correct. There's essentially through the hospital planning process.
road.
I believe this. There was a tweak of the original preferred alternative of the roundabout. The shifted around and whatnot to minimize impacts to the hospital. So this particular design that would be advanced is something that minimizes the impact to the hospital.
But there's definitely an issue with the school, a strong issue.
when, Libby, did you, because I mean, I remember that, but that was a little while ago.
It was 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I
I don't
think,
think it's changed based on recent discussions with the superintendent.
Okay, so I'm going to bring that up.
this is, okay.
Christy, did you have something? Okay, so I guess, Mike, the question I have is what, as just a general percentage, no one's going to hold you to it, what level of improvement do you see if this design is completed and the construction is done? 50% increase in traffic, good traffic flow, a 10% increase? What do you see as the upside?
Are you talking about
benefit?
specifically for Four Corners
Four
intersection?
Corners, yeah, still on Four Corners.
I think it would go from a failing intersection to an acceptable level of service. And then, we rate these things on an A to F spectrum. It would essentially go from a failing or super failing intersection at peak summer conditions to something that's more acceptable, greater than a C, probably more in line with a B level of service.
Because I just want to put out there that this is one of the major intersections on this island that is a pain for everyone. I mean, if you talk about
Especially
relative,
when there's no school.
yeah, traffic, traffic jam on Nantucket is nothing compared to what it is in most places, but it's all relative. It's, you get a dinner invite to go to Nantucket on a Monday for a Thursday night, and you say, great, and Thursday rolls around and you're like, do we really want to drive all the way out to Nantucket? Yeah, it's all relative, but nonetheless, it's a traffic jam. But this is one of the most major failing intersections, I think, and personally, I would be supporting fast-tracking any dialogue with the school through whoever needs to be involved or whatever needs to be done, because I think in terms of dollars and the ask we're putting to the town meeting and the voters to be able to demonstrate some productivity in a very tangible way where nearly everyone goes through this intersection at least once a day if you drive, if you're out and you're on the road. But I think it would just be beneficial. So I just want to have said that, and then I think we'll follow up with our discussion, our group discussion and rankings and evaluation on that kind of topic as a general matter, if that's okay with everyone.
I'll probably just for comedic relief, just say that some people don't go through that intersection at all because it's
So, yeah.
Well,
Which
Nobody
puts
goes there, it's
pressure
too
on
busy.
Which puts pressure on other areas that aren't really
I
designed
think,
for it.
I think, I was involved with a lot of those meetings with the previous school committee, members at that time. Some are still there, some aren't. Sadly, some aren't. But anyway, I think when Bartlett Road roundabout first got conceived, before we had the land, and all the work that's gone into getting that ready to go, Mike, seems like 100 years ago now.
Yeah.
The attitude about the crosswalks and the sort of the way things work has, improved with some of the members. I know that because we talked about this and we met with them. I think that what Steve is saying in a simple way is, we're ready to fix this stuff. I think we, meaning the people that live here and not just year-round. It's some of people, this is embarrassing that we can't fix this stuff. We have the land with the swap from the 40-foot road, unnamed way. You know, at the time when we were talking to the school committee, we needed that sliver in front of the tree. I don't even know if we need the sliver anymore of that little corner there with the electric box and all that stuff. But, you know, this is a different time now. We've had 10 years of a roundabout that works in one of the worst intersections we've ever had. And everybody takes a shortcut on Newtown Road to get to it now. Come on. It's foolish to talk about this anymore. That's all I have.
Christie?
Mike, is there an alternative plan if the rotary doesn't happen, as far as making an improvement to that intersection?
The realignment's
or is
ridiculous.
there just the one option that you guys have looked at as far as improving that intersection?
We did go through a process of looking at design alternatives. I think we selected a preferred alternative. I think the mini roundabout is a compromise as far as reducing impacts to everyone who's affected by this. So I think what we're advancing is that option. Yes, it's a new preferred alternative. And I'll just actually note on page 11 here, I do have a map of all the bike path and intersection improvements that are prioritized, and that the 3 priority intersections are what's in front of you as part of a request. We're trying to be diligent and address what we've considered through an evaluation using objective criteria of what those priority intersections would be. The number 1 priority is the Bartlett Surfside intersection. That's number 1 because it scored the best. It had the least amount of right-of-way impacts with the greatest amount of safety and congestion improvement. Number 2 was the Old South and Fairgrounds intersection, which is already being advanced as well. Again, that scored well because of the insignificant right-of-way impacts. But 3rd is this Four Corners intersection. So all 3 of the top priority intersections are trying to be advanced as part of this effort. Obviously, they all had different issues and concerns: utility, right-of-way. I don't believe there's any environmental issues, but they're all trying to be advanced and probably be implemented at different phases, but advanced at the same time.
Okay, and do you have back on the Four Corners, do you have an overlay of the land area on a, not necessarily a fully engineered drawing, but for instance, you had provided some beta product for rotaries on different roadways. Do we have something like that for the Four Corners that helps to illustrate who the stakeholders are and where there might be some friction, and as opposed to just relying on people's memories of who's involved to what extent? Because frankly, I think that that's something we're going to be discussing that again. Four Corners is not going to go away from this group. I think I'm not going to suggest we're going to take up a torch, but
Yeah.
I want to understand it better, and I'd like to be, it's part of our recommendation. I think it's a strong recommendation for this.
The hospitals agreed to move.
Yeah, I think there's a good scope of work that's provided, an existing
Yeah, I
condition
saw that.
map,
I just
but
don't
I
see
don't
an
think that we...
overlay that might identify who some of the stakeholders are. So as opposed to belaboring the point, I think
Yeah.
that's certainly, it's okay, Libby, we're going to do a follow-up on that a little bit, and maybe we'll have some discussion, and then we'll bring something to you all. I don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time on it. Everyone's busy, but this is a really important intersection, and if we can focus on it now, especially if the school's in front of us, there's a little give and take on topics that might be, let's get it done if it's possible. Okay, any other questions on that first group? And if not, we'll move on to the Old South Road corridor. And Mike, I have some questions for you on the location maps when we get to that. Just to cross-reference them.
Sure. Would it be easier to just go through all the projects, or take questions on a particular project?
Yeah, okay, so this is what I'd like to do. Let's do your presentation, and then we are going to kind of look at them. We'll do questions, on a kind of an intersection by intersection basis, and at that point, you can point out which maps go to. What I want to do is cross-reference. We have the town administration recommendation that has a little bit different text than the maps. Okay. And your spreadsheet. All three have a little bit different identifying information. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to cross-reference those as we go through them, so we know which is which. That's all.
Sure, that's fine.
So do your presentation, we'll go from there.
Sure, and if I could just ask you to, if you could start on page 4 42. That's the overall area map that shows all of these improvement projects. And if there's any discrepancy in the verbiage, this is still kind of a work in process to segment these projects into actually implementable chunks. There are certain recommendations. I'll just say new bike paths that I don't believe should be treated as a segmented or a separate project, that they should be rolled into other improvement projects. If an intersection is being rebuilt, it should probably be rebuilt with the path and not as an afterthought at a future date. So they should, the attempt is to cobble these together into actual chunks that address all the needs at the same time. So on page 42, there's an overall area map showing all the projects. The 43 shows a very basic rendering of what the profile of Old South Road is intended to look like. The most predominant features that were being recommended are landscape medians. That's to help facilitate two-point left-hand turns out of some driveways where it's really near impossible to take a left-hand turn out of some of these businesses. So it's an attempt to facilitate a two-point left turn, which again would help accommodate the flow of traffic. There's also a path, a side path provided on the south side of Old South Road to also help improve pedestrian access along both sides of the road. There was a conformity analysis done with the goals for transportation. One, keeping in mind that there is a town and country concept for development, and that some recommendations that came out of this corridor study process they would require town meeting approval, such as adding turning lanes out in the country district, that kind of thing. So the good news is a lot of these improvements are focused within the town overlay district, which is the healthy thing for the community, is to focus your transportation investments to address congestion within the town overlay and not so much in the country. Multimodalism, all these projects can address transit accommodations with bus pull-offs. Pedestrians are accounted for through improvements through crossings. I mentioned the medians that help facilitate refuge areas for pedestrians crossing Old South Road. New paths, as well as vehicle traffic as well. The congestion and safety, none of these projects that were recommended, none of the options that were considered that didn't fully address congestion and safety were recommended in advance, and they're not part of this presentation. And environmental historical sensitivity, there was an effort only just for diligence to help reduce congestion at the Rotary by considering a roadway through the Wannacomet water property. There's two reasons why that really wasn't recommended after the study. One is environmental. Obviously, there's certain environmental impacts that make that not an ideal project. But the bang for the buck, if you will, the impact of congestion, just really wasn't there. So the project just wasn't justified, number one, on a congestion management basis, but also environmental. And there are all these projects the intent is to utilize local native materials, Belgian block, split rail fencing, and not so much materials and configurations that aren't typical of Nantucket. We want to keep it within the vocabulary of the community. So that said, move on to other specific recommendations. We did go through a criteria evaluation. That's also provided on pages 46 and 47. I don't know if I should go into that in any great detail because it is very rigorous, the different factors that go into informing the scoring of the projects. But on page 47, there is the score is provided. You'll see that most projects that address not only vehicle, transit, pedestrian projects, those scored the highest, but projects that didn't necessarily hit all of those user groups didn't score as well. Say a bike, a new side path project that was simply nothing but a path didn't score as well as an intersection project that not only addressed vehicle congestion, transit, and pedestrian, but also had not so much right-of-way impacts. So those projects scored very well. As far as impacts to the network, the whole study area for these Old South Road projects. It runs from the Rotary down Old South Road to the airport, up Noble Deer Farm Road to Milestone Road, and then the major intersections along Milestone Road, that being Monomoy Road and Pulpus Road. The map on page 48 shows what if there was the build out of the Richmond development at 100%, if there was a 1% annual growth rate in traffic for the next 7 years, and if all of these projects were implemented all at once. This map is intended to show you what the conditions to the system would look like, and that all of the intersections, all the approaches to every intersection is within an acceptable level of service. Whereas under the current conditions, many of these intersections are failing and would be even more stressed with the build out as projected. There is a prioritization of these projects, the focus being the Milestone Rotary, which is really the key to all of these projects. If all the other investments were realized except for the Milestone Rotary, you find diminishing returns on the benefits to congestion. Essentially, we just have queuing and spillover of queuing into other intersections, such as the Fairgrounds intersection. Basically, improving some of these other intersections without improving the Rotary, you really would not see any benefit to congestion or safety. So the corridor between the Milestone Rotary, Fairgrounds, Old South Road, and the Old South Road reconstruction to Amelia Drive is really seen as the priority and really the fundamental corridor projects that would see the most benefit. But the other projects would have some benefit as well. It's just that these were ones that are very necessary and fundamental and a prerequisite to improving the network. If we're going to go project by project, if just briefly note what the improvements are envisioned for Monomoy Road and Milestone Road. If you look on page 50, there's a new bus pull-off and a path along the north side of Milestone Road. The intersection of Monomoy Road, the merging, the skewed approach, if you will, to Milestone Road is being straightened up in more of a perpendicular approach. Not a whole lot of congestion relief at this intersection, but this is seen more of a pedestrian and transit accommodation with the bus pull off. Some relief to traffic by having the NRTA pull off the road and not create a queue along Milestone Road. And that by providing a path along the north side, there is a pedestrian accommodation to help facilitate that, and a much more improved crossing of Old South Road at this intersection. Right now, there really isn't much of a crossing at all. Moving on to the next intersection on page 51 is the preferred reconstruction of a roundabout at this intersection. This would eliminate what's currently 3 approaches of Pulpus Road to Milestone Road. This particular, again, I noted earlier in the presentation that the projects that had the most benefit to congestion and safety were recommended. This really had the best accommodation to pedestrians. It reduced the conflict points, which is our measure for safety. The opportunities for crashes were dramatically reduced with this configuration, and congestion was just handled the best with this rather than the configuration of Monomoy Road, which is essentially a perpendicular approach to the intersection. There was really no benefit to congestion at all, but just realigning the intersection, and that this particular configuration had the greatest impact to congestion and safety. On the next project, Noble Deer Farm Road and Milestone Road, really the same story. There's the queues along Noble Deer Farm Road are very significant, particularly in the mornings. So a roundabout at this intersection had the greatest impact to congestion, and short of a signalized intersection, which is something that wasn't even evaluated or wouldn't be acceptable to this area. This is really the best option for addressing congestion. As well as safety. It really slows down traffic as traffic goes along Milestone Road and approaches town. And there are, like I said, other transit and pedestrian accommodations with bus pull-offs along Milestone Road and paths and crossings that are provided as part of that development as well. The next project, Milestone Rotary Reconstruction. This is an old idea. I would say this is about 10 years old.
Well,
Probably 12 years.
older.
Page 53.
It's because we didn't know anything about a roundabout then. We thought they were all the same.
Nat was part of that initial review of this option, so he could tell you the story on how that went over at presentations. But this option was updated using today's data and today's projection of traffic flow. The best benefit to reducing the queues are mostly found along Sparks Avenue and Old South Road with the two-lane approaches to the intersection. But there are a number of additional crosswalks and paths that you can see on this. There are crossings of Orange Street and Milestone Road. That's, again, to help facilitate movements in and to and from town. We have a bike lane strategy for Orange Street, and this accommodates that. Basically, getting bike traffic to go with the flow of traffic and to have their own area of the roadway dedicated just for their use. So these crossings are absolutely necessary to help facilitate that.
So Mike, this is one I just have a question on, something's not connected. This is your map that says location A, Old South, page 53 that I have?
It's right here.
Location 4.
Okay, so there's two page 53s, I guess that's the problem. Okay, I'll pick that up at a later point. Go ahead, sorry.
I have just one question. Does this plan eliminate the stop sign on Sparks?
Yes.
Correct. That would be a yield condition. And again, like I said, this is probably the priority project. This is the key to addressing the congestion in this network. The next project is project page 54. This is the Milestone Fairgrounds roundabout. I won't spend a lot of time on this because there's already been an authorization for the initial.
Old South Fairgrounds.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
It's okay, Mike.
Old South Road and Fairgrounds Road. Again, this is one of the priority intersections. That, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this authorization has already been appropriated.
Can you give me the name, what you're using again? What are you describing it as?
On location 5, page 54, this is the Fairgrounds Old South Road roundabout.
Old South Road at Fairgrounds Roundabout, and that's location 5?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And location A, which this is the inclusion of medians along Old South Road between Fairgrounds and Amelia Drive. Again, this is the medians are required twofold. It provides refuge for pedestrian crossings from the recommended bus pull-offs to essentially circulate from the bike path on the north side of the road to the businesses on the south side of the road. It also accommodates the two-point left-hand turns out of the driveways, a lot of the commercial businesses there. So there's two benefits to the landscape median. Okay. You could stretch that to a third benefit and say that if it's landscape medians, it's more of a traffic calming feature to the corridor, and that could be a third benefit to this area as well. Some would say a fourth because it's a beautification, but we'll stop there.
Can you cross-reference that to your spreadsheet? Which project is that for the Old South Road breakdown?
That's the Old South Road reconstruction, rotary to Amelia Drive.
Okay, great, thank you.
And that includes a sidewalk on the south, right, Mike?
Thank you,
I
Matt.
know that we
Thank you. I left that
didn't
out.
say it, but it's there. That's that's the plan.
Yeah, the plan is to have an 8-foot wide side path along the south side of the road, not necessarily a separated
New term.
a shared use path, which is already provided on the north side of the roadway, to give some minimum accommodation to pedestrian traffic. The location 6 is Amelia Drive, and there is an existing. There's two options that are provided in your packet. For budgetary reasons, we looked at the option 3, which is a mini roundabout condition. Amelia Drive, just so you know, is a private roadway. I believe there's discussion of requiring that as a public way, but it's private right now. There will need to be some coordination with the abutters of Amelia Drive to what the profile of that road and the use of the road should be, whether it should be one-way with parking, two-way with parking, two-way without parking. There's a whole list of options that need to be evaluated. For budgetary purposes, we're recommending that, or envisioning that the existing condition stays. And there would be a demand to keep that two-way, and to accommodate that left-hand turn movement out of Amelia Drive onto Old South Road, a mini roundabout accommodates that. And if you did go back and look at the impacts to the network, there was slowdown on Orange Street, obviously not Orange Street, Old South Road. the flows from Old South Road going towards town, they would need to, just with any roundabout condition, you need to yield to the traffic that's in the circle. They would be impacted. So there'd be some reduced level of service for Old South Road, only to accommodate the left-hand turn movements out of Amelia Drive. On 54, location 7, this is at Youngs Way. No congestion improvements other than adding bus pull-offs. Again, this is an effort to get the bus out of the stream of traffic flow and create more of a safer loading, unloading condition for the transit. You can see a path along the south side of the road. This is the pedestrian accommodation. There's not a lot. This was not scored very highly, only because there's really no congestion relief. There wasn't a congestion problem that needed to be addressed, so it just didn't get the points.
Can I just make a quick point on that, Mike?
Sure.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. That sightline issue pulling out of Young's has been being kind of addressed in this little plan, and also too, and everybody should know this. These properties along here, in between the new fish meat place and this road, are going to change. Stuff's going to happen. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a sidewalk there by itself, in my opinion, whether we do it ourselves or whether the improvements as time goes on to those properties they're in.
Be a condition of the development. Yeah.
Something's going to change, and it's going to be a condition of some sort to get that done. So one way or the other, this little spot is sort of in a I don't know, different spot as far as improvements go. You know what I mean? Like the other spot where the fire goes going to Amelia, that has to get done because
Gotcha.
That's already developed and it
Yeah.
never got done through the process. This one will get done somehow through something else eventually.
Thank you, Nat. Mike, just cross-reference that, please, to your spreadsheet. Which one is that?
That is Old South Road, Amelia Drive, mini roundabout, if you're referring to location 6.
On the previous page. We skipped it, Mike, a little
Yeah,
bit.
no, the next one is
Oh, location 7. That would be part of the Youngs Way, Lovers Lane, Amelia Drive to Youngs Way, excuse me.
Amelia Drive to Youngs Way. Okay,
Yeah,
great. Yeah, it's
Project 8 in this list.
Your point about kind of combining these, just a segue, because it seems to it makes more sense to you as a traffic planner that if this happens, and they're right next to each other, they should be better. It also will be a lot easier if we can consolidate some of these to get the information to people.
Okay.
It's very confusing. This isn't on you, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's very confusing to have, this part, Youngs Way Path, Amelia Drive, connector, switch off. It's streamline the information.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I agree. So what I did is these projects 1 through 4, I kind of categorize as the rotary and roundabouts, and 5 through 7 was the Milestone Road, and then 8 through 11 was Old South. That made it easier in my mind,
Yeah, I
which
think
might be
you're-
for the public.
You're really onto something there.
Okay.
No, really, I mean, it's
I'm just trying to figure out how to get the information to Julia, trying to make it.
If you have more time, you write a shorter letter. So coming down with 3 different projects out of this whole list of, say, a dozen or more,
Yeah.
it does make it it's more digestible.
Yeah, no, Jason's point, it's a good grouping. The point is that it may be beneficial to group these things so people can digest them. There's going to be questions as it is, and if you're questioning if you're not questioning the information, if you're at town meeting and you're trying to understand the information, but you don't even understand what you're looking at in terms of identifying it, it undermines the goal of getting it approved because people don't understand it, they're not going to vote for it. So
Yeah.
just to throw it out there.
Yeah, there's definitely a balance between breaking it all down and making every component,
Yeah.
communicating every point, and then
Yep. It's not on
making it
you.
a digestible project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what Steve is saying is true. However, I can't help it. TMI level, all of a sudden then it becomes on Facebook, what are we doing? This is stupid, and all hell breaks loose over something that we already know we need to do. It's complicated. Because like what Jason is so connected to the improvement mindset, like I am as a younger guy, except that we got asked this the other night about why doesn't everybody know about all this stuff? Well, we post meetings, we do all this stuff the old way, the abutters notices from Pony Express. No one knows a thing. No one heard of Six Fairgrounds ever. You know, people haven't heard that there was apartment buildings allowed in Nantucket through CN zoning, which was, what, 8 years ago? Nobody knows anything. So it's complicated. I think that we need to have a modern, thoughtful, sort of some kind of process to talk about this with the public without it becoming social media insanity, because then you're getting it out there and everybody reacts a different way. When you have the information, you have the screen, you have, I'm not saying we should have consultants come to Nantucket to do this. I'm not saying that. That's after the consultants. In a way to have debate and discussion without it being a fight. Because that's what ends up happening. I'm telling you right now, it's already happening right this minute on Facebook about some of the stuff that we're trying to do.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I mean, like when I hear about Sparks Ave, I sit there and say, this is an old argument at the school. Like way before the hospital even came to on paper. They weren't even going to Wyers Valley yet when that argument was happening. That seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So Bartlett Road, we didn't even talk about a roundabout at Bartlett Road when we were talking about the high school intersection.
Yeah.
Haven't we graduated to at least 11th grade by now with that? I think we have as the public in general. They're accepting it more. That thing that happened with Milestone Rotary in 2005, when Arch McCall was on at that time before he passed away, my prediction of what the people would say happened, Mike. You were right there.
Oh, yeah.
The consultant, you had to drive him to the boat with a bag over his head. Okay? It's true. I mean, I'm not making it up. It's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And before this building was built. So people weren't ready yet. They didn't travel to Europe enough.
Yeah.
Now we got roundabouts all over the Cape. Andover's got 2 or 3. They've rebuilt the town. It's like it's going to work. It's just it took time for people to accept it.
Yeah.
So now I think we're ready in it for a different way to present these things instead of it being like a new thing. Okay? So thank
Yeah,
you, Mr.
and-
Chairman. I'm just trying to,
No,
I'm sorry. There's
that-
so much stuff here that we've already talked about, and now it's collective because of the Beta thing and the other 2 studies that Richmond paid for. It's sort of coming to fruition a little now, but it's old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not new. Anyway.
So Nat makes a good point, and it's how these things get advanced and how they get discussed. What I'm talking about is a little bit different. I'm just talking about how we label them.
Yeah.
We're going to be putting maps up. We're going to be distributing this information. I'm simply saying whether it's they all have some say location A, some say location 7. This isn't on you. I understand you have your own within the transportation planning and the different processes you're going through. You label these things consistent with how you process them. I'm simply saying before it gets translated to town meeting, I think it would be beneficial, and it certainly would be easier for us, because I'm having difficulty locating, cross-referencing the maps, the spreadsheets, and the recommendations from town administration, just simply saying that we consolidate or systematize the way that we label these so that it's consistent and it's easily picked up by people. I don't know if it's location, they're all location by number or by letter, or if it's a text descriptive. And then the other aspect of it is grouping them perhaps, as Jason was suggesting, so that they also make sense in that regard. So just some thought there.
No, I think these are all great ideas. There's
another
definitely a little
point
bit of a
that's
marketing
important.
spin to some of these as far as communicating that out.
Yeah.
So aggregating some of these smaller projects into one big.
Yeah. And then just being consistent with how they're labeled as an after effect for public consumption,
Yep.
as opposed to internal processing, was I just want to bring that up.
That's true, and you could add procurement to it. Then we talk about out years, and we talk about placeholders.
Yeah.
I mean, I think prioritizing it combined with how the bidding and sort of seasonality of doing this stuff ends up happening is sort of I think that's what you're trying to say, as far as
Yeah,
like,
well-
it's this may happen first, but this may work. It's not that easy to define that.
Well, so
You
one
know
of the
what I'm
things we're
saying?
doing along those lines, Nat, and part of this whole discussion was to get them, we now have them with planet numbers,
Yeah.
because that's how they're tracked for those purposes, so that we can be referring to them with Planet numbers. The problem with using Planet numbers is no one really understands what they mean, and they don't describe anything. They're just a unique identifier.
Yeah.
So I think I think we're all kind of clear on what it is we're hoping to accomplish. And Christie?
I was just going to say, you just have to be prepared, though, that there's not one that's going to bring down the whole lot if you group them together, that they do have some component of being able to stand alone, you know.
Okay.
But
That's true.
And along those lines, I mean, I think the Old South stuff we're pretty well through that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so just in terms of prioritization, I mean, that's, Christie's point segues into, yeah, we want to put these all through together, but if something doesn't go through, what are the prioritizations so that that can be articulated both to the community, at town meeting, and the voters? And I'm guessing that your list on your spreadsheet for the Old South breakdown, which starts with the Milestone Rotary, corresponds to your prioritizations on page 45, which is the NB and EDC evaluation criteria, which gives us the total scores and the total average scores.
It breaks it down to even more projects, so hopefully it doesn't make it any more confusing, but I did rate the paths, for instance,
Yeah.
the path on the south side of Old
That's
South
what I
Road,
was-
the
that's
path
right.
on the north side of Milestone Road. Those were splintered in order to evaluate them as separate components, but
But the Old South improvements that you've put on the spreadsheet, these are, they're clearly not in alphabetical order. So these are a prioritization, of, to some extent, from top to bottom.
which page are you
The
referring
Old
to? again,
South,
so I'm clear?
your spreadsheet that breaks down projected costs with a 4% in.
This is on page 41. Am
I
looking
don't
at
have
that
the
correct?
page
the
numbers.
spreadsheet, I think it's 8 through 11,
8 through 11?
basically, on the Planet numbers.
Yes, yeah, I'd say it's safe to say that that's in order of priority.
Yeah. And then that corresponds to your page 45, which is where you've added some additional subcategorization for pass. Is that what you were saying?
Correct, in an effort for scoring, yes.
So as opposed to trying and translate that at a later date, just,
Yeah.
I mean, I was, I guess, demonstrating some of the complexity. Give us a prioritization of the Old South stuff.
Okay, I think you have that on the in the capital plan, that listing that's here on the spreadsheet that you have, the master sheet.
Is that the one we received this morning?
Correct.
Yes, okay, thank you. Good, perfect.
There are other components to the Old South Road improvements. Again, the balance of the projects for Marianne Drive, Macy's Lane, and Nobody Farm Road intersections. Those are all pedestrian improvements. Again, more bus pull-offs, extension of paths. So I won't belabor those. If it's okay, I'd move on to the Fairgrounds area roadway
Yeah,
improvements. if there's no other questions.
just check to see if anyone has questions at this point for Mike on the specific intersections or any of that stuff, and then I have one comment.
I just want to make a plug, Mr. Chairman, on the ones you just kind of glazed over, the pedestrian ones.
Okay.
I want to make sure those don't get thrown out because we're trying to save a little bit of money. To me, those are the most important. The ones at Young's Way was traffic calming and improving roads for more cars and is good, but we have to improve the walkability and for bikes and for pedestrians. I just want to make sure we don't try to categorize those as less important.
No, thank you. Wasn't my intent to.
No, I knew you weren't. I just want to make sure that when we're ranking these things, they're equally as important as for cars, not just think about the cars.
And just so, along those lines, not at this point in your presentation, I'm also going to bring up where we're looking at in terms of out years for Greenway Path Systems, the Central Railroad project, Trail Project. I'll bring those up, but along pedestrian. Mike, just before we close out Old South, FY18 had if you could speak to how this relates to the current request. FY18, we have 150 authorized for professional services and associated costs for the engineering and permitting of the Old South Fairgrounds Road Rotary.
Correct.
This is, so the portion that is, forgive me, I've got a few different spreadsheets. And you've broken that down. The portion that you're requesting for this year, for the Old South Road Fairgrounds, well, actually, yeah, 245, 728. This is a supplement, the 245 is a supplement to what was authorized in 18 for that design work?
Yes. Yes, there's that would include any type of property acquisition, which should be minimal, if any at all. But the intent is to cobble the supplemental funding of the Old South Road Fairgrounds intersection, cobble the supplemental funding into this array of projects that are in this authorization request.
Okay, thank you. All yours.
Thank you. The second to last project I have on here in the spreadsheet, the Fairgrounds area roadways. This again includes improvements to Amelia Drive, if that becomes a public way, and if there's any reconstruction needed for that roadway to help that road function better. That's part of this project. At least the reconstruction of Amelia Drive is in there. The construction of Waite Drive from Tacoma to the two Fairgrounds parking lot area. That's part of this Fairgrounds area roadways request. And there is a conceptual map of driveway improvements. The driveways to Old South Road from the two Fairgrounds parking lot, and driveway connections to Amelia Drive, and some internal to the two Fairgrounds parking lot. Those improvements have been rolled into this request as well. The improvements to the two Fairgrounds parking lot has been broken out and put into FY20, recognizing that the priority would be for Waite Drive, those roadway improvements, and for the eventual recommendation for reconstruction of Amelia Drive. Those would be the priorities as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I just...
Yeah, please.
Mike, I'm just trying to help you
Okay.
with this, because I have the same issue. Sometimes I talk like everybody knows what I'm thinking, and it's hard to do, especially when we talk about Amelia Drive. The confusion and questions about Amelia Drive in the last 3 years, 2 to 3, has been like at the highest level imaginable with the neighbors, because they think the town screwed it up, the planning board screwed it up. Well, technically, yes, it was a mistake in the 80s to make it 24 feet with parking on one side. It doesn't fit to it. It needs to be 29. However, trees are matured. There are several different options with this improvement of this road. It isn't going to be just, we're doing this. It's kind of, isn't it? I mean, you know what's going on with that. That's why I'm trying to help. Because people are going to ask, or they're thinking about it. The bump out thing with the trees versus moving it back on one side, making it one way versus leaving it two way, and kind of making it stay jiggly, but because to keep the traffic slow, but at the same time not making it super wide where it's just boom, boom, you can park and drive two lanes 9 feet each side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to explain that the improvements aren't defined 100%, but there's some really good work that's gone into fixing this road over the last 2 or 3 years, as far as concepts.
Yeah.
Other than this roundabout thing is a separate issue from the road.
Yeah. I think that's why we're asking for an authorization that assumes that we would reconstruct the road to accommodate the parking and two-way traffic. That's the authorization request. Obligating all of those funds is not necessarily a requirement. There may be a less expensive solution that ultimately will come out of the coordination with the abutters of Amelia Drive to essentially let them say what they would like to see the roadway look like, and we can compare that with what works, and then see what the cost of that is. The cost of that should be within the authorization amount, because we're assuming what is the most expensive option,
And this
that's
doesn't-
the authorization. Not saying that obligates.
And
all
we
of
have
that.
400,000 more from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right? For Waite Drive, not part of this 1.314, right?
That's my understanding.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's true.
So I'm not sure about that.
It was in last week's thing. So is that 400,000 in part of this? Because that won't be enough money. Say that. Not. I thought that this was additional, Brian. No.
This is
Sorry,
supplemental?
Brian. I didn't mean to. The 400,000 that has been allocated out of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for Waite Drive only, is that part of this 1.314, or is it separate? It's included in it. So there's really only 880 through.
But I think the discussion I've heard with Andrew so far was that this road is going to be more like closer to $2 million.
That's right.
And
Well,
but it would be phased, and the remaining funds in 20.
okay. I mean, all I'm going to, whatever the minutia side of all this, I'm just trying to make sure that, because of what's been going on with this process, the neighbors, everyone thinks Waite Drive is going to be what we're saying it's going to be in the decision after the appeal, 20 days for the 6 fairgrounds. So what I'm saying is, I just want to make sure that we have this ready to go when we need to do this, so it's not running into issues. You know what I'm saying? For money. As
Right.
far as the Amelia thing, the tanking process for that road, Libby, is just, you know, the typical process, because the road is done, right? That's just legal work, and
Yeah, but
the
it's gonna
typical-
take some
Plan.
time, has to be scheduled in, there has to be procurement, blah, blah, blah.
but it's not. No, I'm
Minutia.
talking just about the banking it public versus private. That's what I'm strictly talking about. What does that cost to do that, Mike, for a road like that?
Develop a layout plan.
10 grand, 20 grand?
10,
I'm just
20,000.
asking.
There's
Yeah.
town council legal fees, advertisement, noticing fees.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not talking hundreds of thousands.
Right.
But it's there's a cost to it.
Right, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that part of it is the first step,
Oh, absolutely.
theoretically.
Absolutely.
It has to happen.
You need to control the roadway.
Okay, so any other questions? I got a few for Mike on this, but any questions from anyone? All right, so Matt's talking about something a little different than I'm thinking. I think we need to know dollars and cents and what's going to happen when and so on and so forth. So we also need to have some kind of an illustration to show the areas of the work, maybe some details of concepts or something. This is just something that needs a little flesh on the bone, in my opinion. I understand that it's kind of an emerging thing, and you haven't got all the concepts together, but it sounds like, at least with respect to Amelia Drive, you have some concepts to the extent that those are public or they're ready to be made public. It's just that it covers kind of a diverse. Generally, they're the same and they deal with a similar topic in terms of the end goal, but everyone who's consuming this is looking at this information and they don't, well, this is here and this is here and how does this relate? And so we need to paint a picture that it describes that, is what I'm trying to say. Also need to get a better understanding of at least, so this is for design and construction, not just design. And
Correct.
which is fine, but I want to be clear because the SIP indicates design, so I was going to ask. It seems like a heck of a lot of money for a design. So it's design and construction, and then flowing from that, it sounds like there's some discrepancy or some uncertainty of whether the amount actually will cover what is the cost that's required. So if we're going to go to the well for this and an authorization, I think it behooves us to have the numbers in a row and know and ask up front for what we need. So those are my comments on that, and I'll
Okay.
be following up on those
Sure.
before our evaluation and recommendation. Thank you. So that's fairgrounds. I just want to, with respect to time, we've got Pleasant Street sidewalk, and if you guys want to talk briefly on the permanent traffic data collection station that's been bumped out, and then we are going to move on to our island home, and we still have the rankings worksheet, and we've got a member and our ex officio member, Libby, have to leave at 10. So I want to be cognizant of time as much as we can. It's up to you, Mike.
Well, I'll be very quick on Pleasant Street so you can move on to your other matters. This project was broken out of the sidewalk improvements with the recognition that utility expansion project from National Grid is being progressed, and we'd like to sync those projects. If there's any opening of Pleasant Street and reconstruction of that we need to be prepared to reconstruct with sidewalks, because that is an urgent need. Bless you. The The costs for this were identified as part of the Complete Streets process. This wasn't the top priority project identified out of the Complete Streets prioritization, but out of that effort, we did have a good breakdown of the cost for design and construction of those sidewalk improvements. So we'd just like to sync the National Grid work to reconstruct Pleasant Street with what we envision to be sidewalk improvements that are much needed.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Any questions on that? All right. I guess the only comment I have is there are, and this is going to be kind of a closing, it relates to the Greenway and footpath system, the Central Railroad Trail project. I think one of my pet peeves is the Newtown Road improvements, the project, Prospect Street sidewalk, south side of by Vestal. And I think just a general comment to you is that, one, we are looking at, our purview is planning, and we know those are on the radar. And for instance, for example, the Prospect Street was a FY16 request that is not in an out year. It's nowhere in our, this isn't on you, but I just want to make you aware because it will come to you.
Okay.
Is that, in essence, what we're looking for is anything that's likely and reasonable as determined through you all and our town administrator should be in our out years. It should be on the list. There should be a placeholder, so we're aware of it for various reasons, including community awareness. I understand we're kind of in a transition year with various things. I'm just saying that this is something we're going to be looking for. And I'm using examples of Prospect Street and Newtown Road and other things which I understand, the greenways paths, which I understand are in various levels of not in discussion, or they may be included in an annual plan to some extent. But we just need to have those types of things identified so we know as a programming committee, capital programming committee, these are costs that are likely and reasonable to be incurred by the town over the next 10 years. So that's just kind of a closing statement on what we're going to be looking for as we go forward with out years. We didn't get into out years too much this year. We just kind of revamping our own system with the SIP request form. And understanding that the DPW is going through a kind of a revamp and a reworking of how you're approaching things and the extent that you're approaching things. So, okay.
Very good.
Comment on that?
Yes, please.
That's something we've been drilling into the departments, the out years. So maybe, could you be more specific about what you mean by greenways paths?
This is a right-of-way committee thing. He's jumping over us.
Yeah.
I know what he's talking about.
Well,
I was trying to figure out how to plug that in.
Well, I'm using some examples that, I'm sorry, Mike, we'll probably get into details of the Greenway Pass, but it's just that these are discussions on projects. What I'm trying to articulate, and I think Mike is getting the picture more than the rest of us because I'm using examples that are specific to things he's involved with, are that as a capital programming committee, we need to know what's in the pipe or what you've reviewed, or if you haven't reviewed it. I'm trying to get everybody on the same page.
Right, no, that's what we've been working on.
Yeah, no, I know you are. It's not a fault-finding thing.
No, I'm trying to figure out what's missing. So all the departments have been told, put forward your 10-year things to the best of your knowledge and ability now, in the out years. So I'm trying to figure out what are greenway paths. By the Central Railroad, you probably mean the in-town bike path project. And I don't know anything about Newtown Road.
Right, so that's the Newtown Road. I mean, I know there's some annual funding. We're working on as a SIP request for pavement improvements. And I see on the map that it appears to be Newtown Road appears to be identified to fall into that category. But I'll say two things. One, I don't believe that the extent of the work that's involved or required there will fit into an annual type of a request. It's something that needs to be its own project. And so there's one aspect of that, which is if we have a list of annuals, we need to know what is to be included in the annuals for various reasons. We need, it's a matter of communication between the departments and the department to town manager to make sure things haven't been listed. Other committees such as roads and rights of way, we're all literally on the same page. Yeah. So there's that aspect of it. Then there's the aspect of it of being able to discuss for capital programming purposes what the costs are. And then getting back to Newtown Road specifically, Libby, what I'm referring to there is the increased use the condition of the road, the lack of a sidewalk, the ancillary uses of homes on that street that are kind of creating some traffic hazard situations. Not that the use of the homes are, but as a conglomeration, there's some, I believe there's some safety concerns. So when I refer to Newtown Road and improvements, that's what I'm referring to. In the map that we were presented, as Newtown Road is included for a sidewalk improvement and a roadway improvement, if we look at the annual amounts that we're budgeting in our SIP and out years, I don't believe that it can be absorbed into the annual without affecting our plan to get caught up and keep caught up with our regular maintenance requirements on a 20-year cycle, doing 5.5 miles per year. You know, it's.
But isn't this a Chapter 90 thing? Is that, I don't mean to jump away from you to him real quick, because I was going to ask him this question before. The 1 million that you've added to Island, you know, the annual, is that adding to what we get from the state, from Chapter 90, right?
Yeah, it's also-
I mean, it's the same thing. So is Newtown, the follow-up, could that just be, as far as the road part, he's really talking about, there's old trench, you know, road cuts. There's about 3 of them from way back that have kind of
Well, it's
become
that- there's also turning- there's
reverse
also-
speed humps in theory.
There's turning radius issues too.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, there's a lot of roads on Nantucket that don't have sidewalks. New Lane's the most dangerous road on the island in the road, in the historic district. But anyway, so we can talk about that all day. But I'm saying is, isn't that can that be plugged into Chapter 90 outside of the sidewalks? I know that's different. That's a whole nother animal. Can't just Newtown just be on the list for just regular paving for that part of it I'm talking about?
As mentioned before, once the funding is identified, we'll be reprioritizing the project.
That's really kind of beyond this group. I think as far as when they just say with that paving plan of, okay, we're going to do this road this year, we're going to do this road. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, so
Steve?
I want to.
I'm just saying, it's two different issues.
I get where your point is, Nat, thank you. I want to kind of back out of this a little bit. I'm trying to accomplish too much in one fell swoop with information. I think it's within our purview to know what's on the plan and to be able to determine that all the departments that are involved in the committees that have a say in these things. And I'm not saying we go to these meetings and we oversee them. I'm just saying it's part of our purview to have everything on one piece of paper when it comes to a department's likely and reasonable request for the next 10 years. That's where Newtown Road comes up as an example. That's where Prospect Street sidewalk comes up as an example. We're not telling you which is your priority. We're telling you we need to have it all in one place. I'm also acknowledging the fact that this is a new effort and there's no blame being assigned to it. It's also a living document, and we'll be revising it as we go. So that's one thing I'm trying to accomplish. The other thing I'm trying to accomplish is just by using examples that I know are relatively urgent, but they're not identified in the placeholders. So I'm using those examples as to why we need them as placeholders, not just for the planning process, but also to the extent that all the different parties that are involved can be trying to advance priorities before it gets to the town administrator to make a recommendation. So I think we've got enough on that one, unless anything has somebody. Okay, so Mike, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Lively discussion this morning. And traffic.
Oh, the traffic counting, I believe there was a $75,000 request for FY19 for permanent traffic counting stations. And there's some supplemental.
They shingled?
They will not be shingled, I don't believe.
Sorry.
There's
some backup information provided.
The updated thing shows it as a 20
That
request.
was actually my mistake, so some of you have it in 20, but it really went back to it was 19, 20, 20 is the three.
And if I could quickly explain the justification for this will give us real-time data year-round of traffic volumes. The reason why that's a need, not only just for information purposes, just so we know what the volumes are, our funding distribution from federal and state levels. The recent legislation requires that specifically for the Cape and Islands, that seasonality be considered as far as funding distribution. So having real-time data, which is collected on the Cape they have, these type of stations there, so they can provide that backup information. We can't. The Vineyard in Nantucket does not have permanent traffic counting stations to help justify that and help inform the level of activity we have on the island, and break that down seasonally. We can do that to some extent, but it's just nowhere near the precision that's needed. So in order to keep up with the rest of the communities in the state, in order to demonstrate our seasonal flux and the level of activity on the island, this really is a need to help sustain our funding levels.
Okay, thanks. I hate to bring it up, but I got to ask the question, Mike, just while we're on this topically, is any concerns about vandalism, any countermeasures, or the cameras or something to go up? I mean, these look like, most of the time of the year, probably not an issue, but in the summer, and I noticed they're kind of in areas where there might be some foot traffic and college kids here for the summer, and people drink and do stupid stuff. And I'm just kind of curious, is there historically a problem with these, or you just deal with it as it comes up?
Having set traffic counters out for 16 years or so here on the island, Sure, there's one or two instances that I can point to in that 16-year stretch of time, but I wouldn't call it an epidemic or an issue that we would get overly concerned about.
Thank you, Christy.
Mike, are there any grants attached to this data? In other words, can we use this to apply for any grants? Or is it just for our
I think it's going to help inform anything that's transportation related with any project, whether it be hospital, affordable housing, wherever there's transportation improvements. You're going to want to be able to demonstrate what the activity is like in that area, traffic volume is like, and this will give us that ability to inform those grant requests. So sure, this is information that will help, probably will be applicable in more areas than I can justify right now. I know it absolutely will help me with the funding levels, my requests through the TIP, through the district, the state, and the federal highway, but there's so many other uses for this. Private development, for instance, that I always get asked about, do I have traffic counts for various times of the year.
Have we ever had this done?
Permanent traffic counting stations? No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just for clarification, so is this two $75,000 requests? One for 19, one for 20? Or is it three requests, one for 19, one for 20, one for 21?
I think we're going to shift all of these up a year.
Up a year. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's 225 for
Correct.
6 stations?
So it's a 3-year project.
Okay.
Sure.
So 6 stations, those 6 locations listed on the SIP request form. There's only 3 on this one.
Okay.
Okay. And is that 2 a year, or is that all 3 and 19, or 3, then 3, then
I
0?
believe the idea is to
2 a
do.
year?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's about 37,000 each, essentially.
That's the estimate.
Gotcha. Okay, good.
Thanks you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Okay, guys, so just time-wise, get a little input from you. We have, Libby's here, she leaves at 10, one member leaving at 10 or shortly before, and we have R. Allen home, and then I think we're gonna be meeting a couple of Thursdays coming up. So we can try and
Good.
squeeze in a quick review of the rankings summary worksheet after the R. Allen home presentation. Rachel, if you. Good morning, welcome.
Morning. Okay, so what you have before you is really more of a request for supplemental funding due to our recent bid coming in far over our anticipated estimates, as well as the budget that we already had approved. So the projects themselves have already gone before you, but we had to reprioritize them and try to figure out which ones were something that we could afford at this time within our current budget, as well as which were the most eminent need. And so we have a rebid that is going out for those as a base bid that is due December 8th. And we are anticipating that response will come in within what we have for funding at this time, which is about just shy of $770,000. The supplemental funding request includes also some soft costs that we did not anticipate at all in the original estimates and capital request. Mostly that would be project management, which we currently have and are using Vertex for. A lot of these projects we thought were going to be individual small projects that we would kind of phase throughout the fiscal year as we did them. But once we started the process, it became quite clear that probably some of the contractors that would be working on, say, the tile work in the kitchen would also probably want to do the work on the bathrooms, and to save costs in the long run, we bundled them all together. Unfortunately, the rebid also has increased our costs with the architect, and we also have the Department of Public Health review of this, which we have needed extensive plans, additional plans than what we normally would do with a bid, that we also had to have a few meetings with them. So that $50,000 is an estimate based on what we're already anticipating that we're going to pay, and we have not received any real understanding of what that project management might be once the bids and the contracts are awarded and the work begins with Vertex.
Fauna.
The 625, the reason why that's in there is because we have the 770 about, and based on what the bid came in from Northern Contracting Corporation, which was just shy of 1.4 million. So we were ultimately in construction costs, and the bid cost about $623,000. So I'm not sure if that 625 is too tight, but we're hoping that maybe we might be able to make that up if we don't use all the $50,000 in the soft costs, that was the base minimum on that. And also in terms of the bid, I don't think that there was a single member involved in this project, even including Dave Fredericks, who was assisting on his own time, being the chair of the building committee, that when we're receiving the bid responses, we're quite surprised at the not only the overall bid, but some of the subcontracting bids as well. The plumbing, for instance, came in double what we anticipated the estimated cost would be. No real rhyme or reason to that. We also only received one bid. One was received late, so that was not accepted. And some of the sub-bids were also only one responder.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Richard?
So these repairs will get you up to speed and carry you through how many years before we've got another bunch of things coming up?
Well, the bathroom repairs we anticipate will be what we need a little bit more than 5 years. I would say that's an 8 to 10 year. We're doing some pretty extensive renovations of the bathroom, unless there's other things that are found once we start opening up some of the walls. The electrical panel is just an enclosure. The nourishment kitchen is handicap access. So these things alone, based on the projects that they are, will get us through 5 to 8 years without needing any type of minor repair that we can't probably do throughout our operating budget.
Okay, so do you see any major repairs on the horizon in the next 5 years?
Yes, but that also needs to be worked out with town administration in the Board of Selectmen recent directive. We have not put through any major capital planning for 19 or the future without having the legwork done to understand if that's what we should be doing at this current site.
So what's your timetable on that, in your mind, as you try to govern this process?
I would hope that by the next capital process, we have a really strong idea of what projects and how extensive they might be, if we're doing it to the current building or a completely different concept. That's my goal. I mean, just off the cuff, there is a lot of the entire ventilation and ductwork in the ceiling, for instance, needs to be redone. We had 2 prior mechanical engineer-related assessments that we have some documentation on that I can give you an idea of what those might be to the building, but it doesn't really get down to the nitty-gritty, and it doesn't address any of the plumbing issues or electrical issues. So there's some idea of what we would need to do to keep it further out. These were things that we had identified as needing to be done now. I just received that phone call that our life safety surveyors are just walked into the facility. So they will probably give us a little bit more of a guideline on what we might have to do in the very, very near future on building identified needs, knowing that we're not moving forward with the current project. So I might have more information by the end of this week on what they're looking at, not necessarily what we're seeing as needs to be done, but what they're looking at, saying these are the things that need to be done.
Mm-hmm.
We have been anticipating them for a few weeks now, so it's kind of a good thing that they're there so that this can get run by them, and then we can have an understanding of maybe what other things that they're looking at that says, okay, if you're not getting this new building, then you need to address these things that we've kind of bypassed throughout the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And they could say nothing. So it's really a crapshoot at this point.
Okay. Christie?
Rachel, I was curious if these, say, the bathroom upgrades, window repairs, are these comprehensive? Is this covering all your windows or any of these projects phased?
The windows is comprehensive. The sidewall is not. We have identified areas that are more subject to wear and tear based on wind directions and our location. So there's certain sides of the building that really are not as in bad of shape. But we are hoping that through our operating budget, we can do certain sections going forward that will need that. There's definitely is certain sections that are not in need of repair at this time.
Got it.
And I'm sorry,
No, please.
replace AC unit, is that the HVAC? I know
That
it says
is
the heating system was complete.
yes.
The is
That
this-
was completed, and we actually have some recommendations coming from them of additional things that we could do to improve the system itself that we're hoping, based on what those costs might be, we might be able to do them within fiscal 19 if our budget request for that goes through, because we added a significant amount for building upgrades to do that. But the HVAC overall is done. What that portion itself relates to is the makeup air in our kitchen and laundry. We did install some of the expenses that we've already done relate to equipment upgrades, and that has already, especially in the laundry, made significant improvement on the air quality and flow in there based on just the equipment upgrades itself. But that AC is 100% the kitchen right now. There's no airflow.
Anyone else at this time? No? I just want to echo the concerns that you've already voiced. I mean, these numbers seem insane to me. I know that's not in your control. Brian, the bid process, these are all subject to prevailing wage? Or, and I think that's just a topic we'll have a discussion about that generally in the cost later on. It's not something you have control over. I do have a specific question, though. The $50K you're talking about that's in the SIP request for the soft costs, that's a supplement to the 162 or the 200,000 that was previously authorized?
Yes. So what we use for the costs associated with building improvement, maintenance, and quality measures with the 200,000, the amount that we've spent out of there thus far is about $37,000, and that so far is just the architect to do the bids and the plans for this project.
And do you anticipate, so the new number will be 250, correct? I mean, just to get information. So do you anticipate you'll use all 250 of that? I thought I heard you say that maybe you
I anticipate we'll
wouldn't.
use all 250 of that, not just in soft cost. So some will be going, that is also where we're taking funding from to enclose the electrical panel, as well as redo our snack bar and nourishment kitchen to actually provide for handicap access.
And the wording of this is sufficiently so that any of these internal line items are fungible. I mean, they can be moving dollars around. 50,000 in soft costs, if it isn't all spent on soft costs, can be utilized for tile flooring or something?
We'll make it that way.
Okay, just so I understand and I can put it to bed. I don't have to make another note. Any other questions for Rachel at this point? Okay, great. We appreciate you coming in. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you. All right, so you all had it. We're going to move on to the summary, the Capcom summary of F19 request worksheet. If you guys want to pull that up, it was passed out this morning. And so just what you have in front of you is a draft of consolidating the information that we will be using to make our evaluations, or at least information we're required to be using to make our evaluations based on our financial policies and procedures. And it's a draft. I'll run through the columns real quickly, and then I've got a suggestion for a couple of them, and then open it up.
Magnifying glass.
So how we're going to do this as proposed, is it will be broken down to track the way we've been processing requests themselves. So we're just keeping things consistent. It makes it easier for everyone in every regard. So there'll be a planet number, the department and the department request will be the next column, and that will also be subcategorized. We're using the DPW as an example by categories and subcategories. So DPW would have facilities, maintenance programs, improvement projects. They'll have another category, fleet management, with equipment and purchases, and for instance, they might have one that's capital cost associated with equipment maintenance or something. We will have at least a 2-year cost. So if there's something that has a FY19 and FY20, we have the capacity to be tracking it all in one place and not having to look at this in our discussions and then go to look at something else. Again, the idea is that it be a summary. Now, there's nothing limiting us from having more than 2 years here. That is from a programmatic standpoint with respect to using the software. You can fold and unfold the years as necessary for discussion. If we have, like Old South Road corridor improvements. Thank you, Libby.
Thank you.
Has a 7-year timeline. So that may be one where we want to be able to unfold in our discussion, have that all on one summary sheet and have it accessible. I think I'll work on that. That aspect may be more important when we come to actually drafting a recommendation. So I'm also trying to rely on our professional resources to help us fill this out, but not have to fill it out at different times in different ways for different purposes. So I guess the takeaway on the 2-year cost is we want to have a cost component, and if it's more than 1 year, we want to have, we would like to know what it is per year and what the total is. The next series columns are the ranking of relative importance. That'll be the group ranking. And then there's another one for the individual ranking, which will be you all to put in your own rank, and if you want, and see how it relates. Or if you, with respect to using the summary sheet, how I envision that is we'd have this in front of us, we'd be discussing something. You may have your own notes, I hope, on your rankings for a particular request, and you'll be able to look at it and you say, I think I want to change that. You make your notes on your individual ranking sheet for the request, but in the summary sheet, you might just make a check or a tick to indicate that a change has to be made, and it helps you to track it. We're also trying to make this a little bit easier for us as we're working through these things. And yeah, please.
On the individual and the group
Yep.
ranking, maybe this is just, is there any way that could be individual first then group?
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm just tracking like mine, and then I see the total.
Sure.
It just tracks
Yeah, I get you.
opposite for me.
Yeah, I get you. So you may not even use the individual column, but I just anticipate we're not going to go through for each person and have the at a later date with the database. Just so you guys are aware, we'll be able to generate whatever the final format is with your own individual rankings printed out for each request. At this point, we're not there. We don't have the resources. It's not developed. If you can use that for your own benefit in terms of if you need to make changes or you want to make changes as we're going through the review process, that's a place for you to track it. Julie had suggested that we add a town admin column for ranking, which I think would be helpful. So I'm going to ask that we do that. The next series of columns is the priority overlay. So these are the imminent threat, legal requirement, phase funding, or a placeholder. And I think it's going to be important to track these in a summary fashion as opposed to any other way. So I added them there. And again, we can discuss all these things in a moment. Risk addresses, during our evaluation process, how we feel about the cost itself within the constraints of the programs we're working in and the regulations, such using the example of Ireland Home, where if we get one bid and it's double what was anticipated and we're also subject to prevailing wage, what are we going to do? But you can still make notation on cost. The capacity, O&M is for the capacity of operations and management to be able to actually implement this. and carry through on it. So again, it's just a place for us to be able to kind of track our own thoughts. You might make a note. It might just be that you put a note 1. You go down that column, and on a separate page you have your own individual notes, so that this is just like a tracking resource. The time is under risk relates to whether this is deliverable, and one of the things we were discussing and trying to stick to past season was whether a project could actually be implemented during the fiscal year that it's being requested for. And if it's not, then I think that begets the question of how we track these things, so that we're tracking them, so that you don't have a request for a certain amount of money in fiscal year 19, but it really isn't intended until fiscal year 20 or 21. I just think that there's some discussion points we can have around that. The funding effects, I put these in here. These aren't something I think that we don't have the capacity to be addressing at this point in our development. The source, yes, clearly we want to know what the source is, but with respect to the effects, positive or negative, with the bond rating or the tax rate, it is our purview, it is our responsibility to be tracking those. There are metrics that the bond rating agencies use for whether a certain capital project is more beneficial or less beneficial, or if they're less beneficial, the degree to which they're less beneficial on your rating, or I should just say how it affects your rating, and your tax rate, obviously. Those are things that once we get into a database and we've got data in place, it's going to be much easier to create a product that will fill these columns that make sense, or similar columns that meet our mandate. I just wanted to bring them up because they are part of what we do, and in terms of my involvement as chair, I'm trying to, we're all volunteers, and I'm trying to keep everything in one place in terms of tracking it, so that when I sit down and look at this for our kind of after-action review for the season, it's there in my radar to bring up and discuss with you all, and maybe with Brian in some detail. So that is, those are the columns, those are their intents. The only thing they're at is we will do a key at the bottom of the sheet, so that you're not trying to figure out IT, LR, PF, PH, what those mean, cost, OM, time, and then if there's any others that we add, we will, we'll put those in the key at the bottom. Thoughts on? I know you just got this, so the concept was that you would get it, take a look at it, and have it to have an opportunity to comment on it Wednesday, and we would finalize it to present and review at our meeting on Thursday, which I'll get to Thursday in a minute on meeting dates and times. But is there any initial reaction or concern or comment?
I need a personal assistant.
Yeah. Well, I got you. I think the only thing I could say to that is, thankfully, we're doing it in a systematized approach, because if we were to do all the things we're supposed to be doing this year, we have more requests this year
have to retire
by one department than we had all of last year for the entire town. Not dollar-wise, not dollar-wise, but in terms of requests. So I think if we hadn't systematized this, it'd be freaking crazy.
I want to say
Technical
something
term.
to you about this. I think that what we're doing this year is still a work in progress, but staff has changed as a result of all this. We're done. I'm just talking about general, the way we're doing it. But I think that the intent and what we're doing is the right thing, because otherwise we're sort of just pushing it off to the FinCom, and theoretically that's what we're doing, right?
Yep.
And we're sort of the FinCom light here. I mean, that's what we are. So I think that after this year, after this, fiscal stuff is done, I think we should be meeting to discuss any changes that to either simplify it, make it a little easier. I still back on my group stuff. I grouped that first 8 things for the DPW last week. Mm-hmm. Because I still feel that, what is it, 5 through, whatever it was, 4 through 10,
yeah.
the 1 point, the exactly 1 million one, I don't see any reason that needed to be individualized, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I do think, though, that we need to have a little bit more from the department heads on individual equipment, individual things that, like, okay, a scale of 1 to 10, we need this, a 10.
Mm-hmm.
This is, saying just high and low is not enough. You need to have, like, do we really need this? Like, when I found out that the DPW only had one loader, which I actually didn't know that, I feel like an idiot, because I know all this stupid stuff, and I didn't know that. You gotta have 2 loaders. I mean, you gotta have 2. You got one breaks, you don't have anything. I mean, you gotta have 2, right? I didn't know they didn't have to. So that, to me, jumped ahead of some other stuff in my thinking process. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that that's not what you're talking about, but I'm telling you how I see everything we've done this year is still a draft process, even though staff has killed themselves to make this work.
Yeah.
I think it's good. I think it was worth it. I think it's going to show dividends, but there's some tweaking to make it a little easier for us, I think, somehow.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just not the supercomputer crazy, but I need it to be a little easier somehow, personally.
I got you now. I think we'll spend two minutes.
Whether
on
we
this
have to
and
meet
everybody
with
else
Julia
wants to-
or Brian, I don't know.
Well,
Becca, maybe she can be my personal assistant with the cap. I don't know. I got to have an assistant, though.
That's a no-no.
I think you got a soft no that's really a hard no on that, and then Nat, Nat, you bring up a good point.
It's a lot of work.
There's
It's
a
just
lot-
a little more than just showing up.
There's a
now.
lot of work involved behind the scenes. Part of, I think I just want to highlight 2 things. One is that the people resource aspect of developing and moving and entering and assigning and putting into reports this data needs to be systematized, and that's a lot of that work is going to be done relatively effortlessly once the database is assigned. Just for instance, we'll be able to have our ranking sheets, put them on your tablet. If this goes the way I envision, you can put in your rankings, you hit submit, it goes to the database, it auto-populates, it prints out a report that is for you to review, it emails it to you automatically, it auto-populates. Anything that has to do with a ranking that we use, either as individually or a group, will be automatically done, or in a click-to-print report format. That will extend to almost any aspect where there's data being used and repurposed. Once it's put into the database, we'll be developing the reports in order to be able to get a very simple, easy way to achieve a printed report or an emailed report for everyone to review. So hopefully we'll cut down on your need for an assistant. I think part of that is a separate track is going to be reviewing where we are after having gone through the season. Nat, I think you bring up a great example. Next year, the numerical prioritization list by a department head, I want to be careful that we're doing this through town admin, in terms of the hierarchical aspect. It gets emailed through finance. But that would be useful. We've asked for it in every instance. So clearly we need it. It's not something we did this year. We've seen that there's a soft spot in how we're processing things. It's useful information. If we don't have enough money, it's going to be very useful for us to be able to quickly ascertain what is nearest and dearest to the department head's operations without having to call them back up or have somebody email them or track it or write it down. So, and there's probably about 10 other things that I've made notes on, and you all will probably have some input on that relate to that.
Well, that
So
kind of,
that's
a
important.
few years ago, when there was a list of stuff from the police department, when they had that boat thing in there, remember the boat? And that's what sort of triggered this thinking in my mind, is like, sometimes you get the feeling that a department head may be putting in sort of a bunch of stuff and just saying, what happens? That isn't right for us to have to think of that. We should see they know what they want.
Yeah.
Versus what they kind of want, versus what, would be nice to have. There's a difference, and they know that. They all do. I mean, I know what I want in my life, more important than another. It's very simple. So that's all I'm asking for, is after this year, for next year. That's really one of my only things other than the system.
Okay, so and the other part of this is that by Christie's, by kind of cutting back on the human resources required to do some of the data pushing, entry and pushing, we're freeing up our professional resources to be addressing things to some extent, which they already are. I mean, without clearly, the town administration and finance is vetting these requests and looking through them for applicability, and we don't have any extra votes or anything that aren't really a departmental nature request, no pun intended, floating around this year. So yes, point well taken, and I think that the more we do what we've been talking about doing, the better we're going to be able to do what we've been talking about doing. Christie.
I was just going to say, it's good to log your thoughts along the process, but really we can't spend too much time on this because we're not done yet.
Yeah.
We need to let's complete it and see how we do.
We're pretty close, but we're not there yet. So in terms of getting there and getting done, we missed a couple meetings with due to various factors, members not being able to attend. Some information was a little bit delayed in processing under the new format.
Not here Thursday.
December 7th. You guys ready?
No,
December
I'm
7th and the 14th are Thursdays. And my recommendation is that, what is my recommendation? Is that we meet to review, we're going to need to meet to review on Wednesday any thoughts and finalize the summary worksheet. If you guys could please think of any open issues that you have with any requests. Any open issues, I mean additional information required by a department head or Libby or Brian, so that you can make your final input on evaluation and recommendation.
Do we tell them that now?
Pardon me?
No?
No, I would like you to put that together for Wednesday
Oh, gotcha.
and have it in a printout form so that we can kind of go through the list, if there are lists, with everyone here. And we'll know, Wednesday we'll know what can't be addressed in a sit-down as a group, so that it can get out to department heads. So the following Wednesday, it's resolved, because we need to begin our recap. So we got the summary to resolve Wednesday. We've got any open items that you may have for department heads or Libby. Put it on a piece of paper, however you want to do it. Bring it to the meeting Wednesday so we can discuss it. Try and get it resolved. If we can't resolve it, then we need it resolved for the following Wednesday. Then after we have that information, we'll be able to step into the following Wednesday and Thursday. I'm hoping we begin to get into to review the rankings on a request by request basis, which will also be as we're part of the process in formulating our evaluations. So we'll kind of just be going through department, taking a look. This is what I'm proposing. You guys, if you want to change it, this is at the pleasure of the committee. But what I'm proposing is we will go through, evaluate with our summary sheet. Everything's in front of us: dollars, costs, rankings, and any other pertinent information, and we can start to consolidate department by department, category by category, our fine-tuning our evaluation, and then that'll bring us up to sitting down and writing a report. So meeting-wise, December 7th and December 14th are both Thursdays at 8 a.m. I think we should meet. If someone can't be here, it's going to be unfortunate. It's a really important time to be here, but unless you have a conflict, please be here.
I can be here on that. I won't be here on the 6th, though.
The 6th? Okay. So the 6th will be reviewing the rankings. So if you have any open questions, would you email them to Julia or to me, and I'll print them out?
I mean,
you've asked along as you go.
I'm just picking at the
Yep.
rankings individually. That's
Okay. Yeah.
kind of like my thing.
All right. So if we've got no committee reports, if anyone has any general comments, Christie?
I had a question for Julia. Julia, on the rankings, with either our Island Home or Mike's Old South Corridor improvements, do you have all those individually? Meaning, when you, okay, I'm just curious to know.
I tried to create it for you last night, but I didn't get to it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just was curious to know, when we go to do our ranking, what we're going to expect to see. Are we going to expect to see? Am I going to be making a ranking
Yes.
on each individual Our Island Home repair thing?
I mean, it's one request.
That's
No,
crazy.
that's a
Separate
yeah,
out.
let me answer that for you, Christie.
Yeah.
The Ireland home will be a one request supplemental, so we'll be ranking that. The
OSR.
OSR is
Is
going to be
15
ranked
million.
individually for the purposes of our discussions internally in conjunction with Mike's prioritization, which he's already got, so that if funding issues come up, we've resolved that stuff in advance. I'm not suggesting that we're going to split it out as a request to town meeting. I'm just saying we need to
No, we
process
can't.
it individually. So,
But we're doing a $15 million placeholder is what the article's gonna be, correct?
Right, I just,
Yes.
for me
that's
to
what-
rank those, I need to know what the
Yeah.
breakdown is.
We're ranking 1 through 11
well,
individually.
there's a spreadsheet page. Yeah, and actually,
That's right, if it's in there, I'll.
It's like
I'll-
46 or
Okay,
something.
all right.
yeah.
That has
There's a
The
spreadsheet
one that you
that
can't
breaks
see
it
without
down.
glasses. It's
I
like
know it,
46
I know
or
it.
47.
That's one of my,
Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
spreadsheet that
it's
breaks
like
down the
that.
cost.
It's fun.
Just be aware that what it does is, what Mike's done is he's given you a current estimate column, and then he's given you a by-year column with 4% escalators. And then this is the key, just in deciphering that, because otherwise you're going to sit there and look at it for
Yep.
10 minutes and wonder what the heck's going on. We reviewed this, Peter M. and I reviewed this with Mike as designees. The total column is of the columns of the years, which year he anticipates doing the work. So he's got his current estimate, and for instance, FY '20, he's got a dollar amount. If you track over to the total and you don't see the FY '20 number, then you've got to find the other year. So he's just putting it in there for planning purposes in terms of costs.
Mr. Chairman, I will
Yes.
not be here on the 7th. I'm off island.
Okay, thank you for letting
that's
us know.
Unfortunate. And I just want to, one last thing about the schools. I had some good conversation with principals and superintendent about the roundabout at Bartlett and Surfside. And it was a much better conversation than it was years ago.
That's right.
They are still hesitant, as they should be, but it wasn't a deal breaker. So we didn't talk about the four corners, but I think there's room to get this done. I think there's political will on all sides to get it done because they look at it as a safety issue. And once they're explained that roundabouts are more safe for pedestrians and bikers, that's what's going to happen on those two roundabouts. It's going to be more safe, and that's what I focus on with bikes and pedestrians.
Thanks.
Of course, the car thing is going to be it's
Yeah.
going to make improvements.
Thank you. That's helpful to know
Huge.
kind of where they are. And, I mean, just while we're in public forum, I don't think we should let the Four Corners thing go. And I know the school's here in front of us for some other things that there may be a little give and take. And I'm not suggesting we barter, but I'm suggesting we barter. This is important for the town as a community. If we're asking for this, we're not asking for something that decreases or keeps the level of safety as it is. We're actually looking at something that's based on all the statistical data, objective statistical data is actually safer, and it will improve traffic flow. So I just want to say in a long way, we can't let that go, and I hope that the selectmen are become aware of it, maybe through committee report or something, that's a topic of focus for Capcom.
there is an alternative.
I mean,
And I know you all have your thing.
No, you're right.
But-
What Jason said, this is what I love
Yeah.
about the newer people that are getting involved. They don't have all these, old,
Preconceived stuff.
horrible stuff in their mind. I love it. Because this is, by having these obstructionist sort of things happening from the past, is just, you might as well just move the boat back to Woods Hole. You might as well just forget everything, because it has to happen. Like, it has to.
Might as well just bring the
Think of it this
houses down.
Think of
Might
it
as well
this
just do
way.
Yeah, just bring.
We got the hospital to agree to move the green light in this agreement with that road and those pieces of property, Steve.
I'm
That's
listening.
a big
I'm
deal.
listening. I know.
Okay, because they improved the green light against the recommendations of department heads. Just because, and it's like, yeah, but the house is in the road. What are we doing? We just moved the Anderson building, like we moved the movie theater across the harbor, and we're gonna fix the green light in the road? We can't move it back 5 feet? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's been going on for the last 5 years in this whole area of way before Wise Valley versus now, and it's great. But the other thing is, as a selectman and as Rob McNeil, who's not here, and I wanted to say this when you brought up Prospect Street, I'm sorry, it's our only way to get to Nantucket. I mean, it's
You don't have to tell me.
if that situation with semis driving through that intersection was going on as a result of a planning board decision or something recent, there would be hell to pay, like Amelia Drive. You'd think Amelia Drive was Prospect Street the way people talk about it. I see that over there as
Much
our
worse.
biggest problem we've ever had that we just pretend is fine.
I
No,
mean,
it's not.
If we
Four
were,
Corners.
if we were to put it on the list,
Prospect, Four Corners, and Quaker is never gonna. There's never gonna be another road to Nantucket. It's Christie. Forget. I'm telling you, Millbrook Road is never going to have pavement on it. But we got to fix what we have because it's it. You know what I'm saying? And we just pretend that we can't fix it. And I just can't believe that this can continue like this all this time.
they're okay. This time I'm going
It's just crazy. I'm sorry.
on our list. They're on our list. Prospect Street is not on our list. It will be on our list. We have a responsibility. Part of what our purview is to be making recommendations on things that are a priority to the town, and clearly Four Corners is one of the bigger priorities when it comes to traffic and transportation. So having all these things on our list in terms of out years is going to be helpful, I think, in terms of the town accomplishing its goals. Nothing, I track what you're saying 100%.
You've been there. You've been
I
on
put
the
those
right-of-way
two on the
committee
top
for
of the
how
list
long?
above anything else. But there's nothing we can say or do or make a recommendation on if it's not in front of us. And then once it's in front of us, I would just ask that we try and coalesce around, if we see that there's some obstacles to it, that it may just be a communication thing, try and resolve them, because if we can move it forward and try and get it authorized, it's important to the community, let's do it. Is that fair?
Yeah,
You good with that?
I think to finish that is it's inevitable for this committee or any other committee that isn't in its purview to jump off track simply because of the personal life
Sure.
experiences we have here just happen. What Jason just said is what I tried really hard to say. He says it way better than I do. The new attitude is not the old now. It may not be perfect, but there's definitely a little change in the school acceptance of something's going to happen. And the town went to humongous lengths to get the right-of-way at Poets Corner and the property across the street to even make it possible, Steve. Like, does anybody even know this? Like, that is, like, massive that was done.
Nobody knows it.
Not many people know that, and that's what I'm trying to say. Same with the hospital. We didn't give them that road.
Yeah.
They gave us something in return that's way more important than a check. So, anyway, thank you.
And we'll hopefully take advantage and harness the positive energy around this stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Get it done now.
I'm going to miss you guys on the 7th, but I'll see you on the 6th.
All right,
Motion
we
to
appreciate
adjourn.
it.
Yes,
Thank you
second.
very much.
Thank you, everyone, thank
Excellent.
you for listening to
And
me. Sorry.
Wednesday, the 8th, is our next meeting, by the way.